Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. My landlord, Mr. Peterson, was a terrible human being. Honestly, calling him human is even pushing it. Just a few things he's done to me over the past 3 years. He stole my washing machine and other household items from the common area, made me pay for a plumbing repair which was clearly normal wear and tear. He even tried breaking into my apartment. When I went to my lawyer after he sent me a letter about a parking spot, he retaliated by trying to charge me an extra $200 per month. Mind you, I was never late on rent in 3 years, except for when he made me pay for that plumbing repair. So the next month I was a couple days late, the list goes on. Now, this apartment was nowhere near nice. I found out the electrical wiring was not up to code. He left me with a balcony for years that had severe safety issues. The ceiling paint was always peeling off. The central heating system was ancient, and so on. One day, I confronted him about the balcony. "Mr. Peterson, the railing is loose. It's dangerous," I said. He just shrugged. "It's fine. Stop complaining about everything." I finally got my chance to leave after he wanted to raise my rent $600 per month. He'd do anything and everything to squeeze more money out of his tenants. So I called the building inspector 4 days before I left. I told him everything. The balcony, when he finally replaced it, didn't have a permit and was definitely not up to code. I told him about the electrical issues and the heating system. I went on and on. The inspector came over the very next day. I saw him taking measurements. Each violation is a $750 a day fine until fixed. I honestly don't know what happened, but it felt so good to finally get back at him. He's at the very least on the city's radar now. A week before I moved out, he tried telling me I needed to be out at a specific time. I never responded because where I lived, that's not how it works. He tried to threaten me with the police if I wasn't gone. Well, I went to the police myself that morning to warn them. Mr. Peterson did come by, threatened and harassed me. I called the police and Officer Johnson informed him I was in the right. "But it's my property!" Mr. Peterson yelled. Officer Johnson calmly replied, "Sir, your tenant has rights. You can't force them out before the agreed upon date." Long story short, he had broken into my apartment. I had left to go to storage while I was gone. He actually changed the locks. I told the police to get the supervisor because I was over being harassed by this guy. Go figure he left before the supervisor could get there. I'm positive he knew he'd be arrested on site. Got the police report. They're charging him with a felony for breaking and entering. Fines plus a charge? Don't be a jerk to good people. As I was packing up my last box, my neighbor Sarah came over. "I heard what happened," she said. "I'm glad you stood up to him. He's been terrorizing tenants for years." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. "Sometimes you have to fight back against injustice," I replied, closing the door on this chapter of my life. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd be telling a story like this, but here goes. It all started when I moved into what I thought was a nice, quiet neighborhood. Little did I know I was stepping into a homeowner association nightmare. I'm not part of the homeowner association, my house is just outside their jurisdiction, but that didn't stop them from trying to control every aspect of my property. The homeowner association president, Karen, yeah, I know, had it out for me from day one. It started small, notes about my grass being too long or complaints about the color of my mailbox. I mostly ignored them since I wasn't actually in the homeowner association. But things escalated quickly. One day I came home from work to find a crew painting my driveway. I was confused and asked what was going on. The workers said the homeowner association ordered them to repave and paint all the driveways in the neighborhood. I explained I wasn't in the homeowner association, but they just shrugged and kept working. I marched over to Karen's house to confront her. She answered the door with a smug smile. "Oh, hello. Don't you just love how the new driveways look?" she said sweetly. "Karen, you can't just send people to work on my property without permission. I'm not even in the homeowner association," I said. She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that doesn't matter. Your driveway is visible from the street, so it falls under our beautification initiative. You should be thanking me." I was furious, but decided it wasn't worth fighting over. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. A few weeks later, I woke up on a Saturday morning to find my driveway packed with tables covered in random junk. There were people milling about, browsing the items. It looked like a full-blown yard sale on my property. I ran outside in my pajamas, completely bewildered. "What is going on here?" I yelled. Karen strolled over, clipboard in hand. "It's our annual neighborhood yard sale. Isn't it wonderful?" "On my driveway? Without asking me?" I sputtered. "Well, since we repaved it, your driveway is now considered a community space," she said matter-of-factly. "Perfect for events like this." I was speechless. As I looked closer at the items for sale, my blood ran cold. I recognized my own belongings mixed in with the junk. "Karen, that's my stuff. You broke into my garage?" I was livid. She had the audacity to look offended. "I most certainly did not break in. The garage was unlocked, and since it's attached to the driveway, it's part of the community space. I was simply putting unused items to good use." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I started grabbing my things off the tables, telling the confused shoppers the sale was over. Karen tried to stop me, saying I was ruining the event. I told her to get off my property or I'd call the police. She left in a huff, but not before warning me that I'd regret going against the homeowner association. I spent the rest of the day changing my locks and installing security cameras. The next few weeks were tense. Karen kept sending me fines for imaginary violations. I got citations for unauthorized landscaping when I planted flowers and noise pollution for mowing my lawn. I threw them all in the trash. Then came the morning I woke up to find my car gone. Panic set in until I saw a tow truck pulling away. I ran out and flagged him down. "Why are you towing my car from my own driveway?" I demanded. The driver looked confused. "The homeowner association president called it in, said it was parked illegally in a community space." I was seeing red. I called the police to report my car stolen, explaining the whole situation. They were able to stop the tow truck and return my car. The officer said it was a civil matter, but advised me to get a lawyer. That was the last straw. I'd had enough of Karen and her power trip. I hired an attorney and filed a lawsuit against Karen and the homeowner association for harassment, trespassing, and theft. The case went to court a few months later. Karen tried to argue that my property was subject to homeowner association rules because it affected the overall aesthetic of the community. My lawyer pointed out that I had never signed any homeowner association agreement, and my deed clearly showed my property lines. We presented evidence of all of Karen's harassment, the fines, the driveway painting, the yard sale, the attempted car theft. We even had security camera footage of her sneaking into my garage to take things for the sale. The judge was not amused by Karen's antics. He ruled firmly in my favor, ordering the homeowner association to pay damages for the harassment and theft. Karen was removed as homeowner association president and barred from serving on the board again. The icing on the cake? The judge ordered the homeowner association to build a fence along the edge of my property, clearly marking where their jurisdiction ended. Karen had to personally pay for it out of her own pocket. It was so satisfying watching that fence go up, with Karen scowling from her porch the whole time. The rest of the neighbors finally saw her for the power-hungry tyrant she was. Many of them came by to apologize for not standing up to her sooner. These days, the neighborhood is much more peaceful. The new homeowner association board is actually reasonable, and they leave me alone. I can plant whatever I want, park where I want, and never worry about waking up to a yard sale in my driveway. As for Karen, last I heard she was trying to rally support to disband the homeowner association entirely. Apparently now she thinks they have too much power. The irony is not lost on me. I learned a valuable lesson about standing up for myself and my property rights. And I got a pretty nice fence out of the deal, too. All's well that ends well, I suppose. The next one is a petty revenge story. A friend of mine had issues with one of his neighbors. They were noisy, continuously drunk or stoned, believed they were untouchable, stole really minor things like potted plants, bins, benches, garden furniture, basically anything that was easily moved and not screwed down. After many times of lifting the fence panels up and taking back the items that they took, he got annoyed with the balls on them and the lack of any real police response. Middle of the summer, they had a habit of having parties, loud music till all hours, and generally scum roaming around the local area causing trouble. My mate had nipped home during his break and noticed that the front door was open and one of the parties was going on in the rear of the house. At that time, he worked as a day laborer for independent carpenter. A plan was hatched. They opened the rear doors of their plain white van. He ran over with the impact driver and proceeded to remove the screws from the hinges and steal the door and throw it in the van and drive off. Plan accomplished, they dumped the door in an on-site skip. When he returned that evening, the door was still missing, was replaced the next morning with a pallet with a mattress stuck behind it. Eventually, someone probably stole a piece of chipboard and that was screwed in place. The next one is a malicious compliance story. For context, the software development company I used to intern at uses a sheet to estimate the cost of building a certain software or update for a client. This sheet includes employees working on the project, how long they estimate it'll take, yada yada yada. After an intern goes around the departments collecting this info from the various employees, we then calculate the cost and send it to the client to accept or reject. Note: Since our company is so popular in the area, we have a pretty long query sometimes, so if you reject the estimate, chances are you might have to wait in the queue all over again to request a new one. So, the day was slow and they mostly had me man the phones and go on coffee runs, typical intern stuff. Then a client calls in saying she wants a piece of clock-in software for her employees so she can more accurately track their work hours. By this point into my internship, I had done at least 4 to 5 of these sheets at least, and I was taught by my supervisor how to identify which departments would be needed for which projects. So after gathering the details from the client, I hang up and translate the needs for the employees, essentially explain it in programmer jargon. Half an hour later, I'm done with the sheet and I have checked the calculations 3 times, so I email it to the client and I swear not even 2 minutes later I get an estimate rejected message on the company smartphone I was given. She added a reply stating, "This estimate is non-compliable with me," so I respond to it with, "We are sorry to hear that, ma'am. Please enjoy the rest of your day," and then I go about my business. Roughly an hour later, she emails the phone again asking, "Is that all you have to say?" By this point, I realized what she was trying to do and report to my supervisor that Ms. Karen was trying to haggle the price. My supervisor calls Karen's phone and asks if she would like to have the estimate resent to her so she can accept, and Karen outright tells her she wants a cheaper price. To which my supervisor tells her the price is non-negotiable and to take it as is. So Karen uses her signature move of, "Let me speak with your manager," but my supervisor simply informed her that she'd get the same response and just hung up on her. Karen eventually did call back and even showed up to the building to renegotiate the price, but was shot down. But she was able to get a meeting with the manager to file a complaint for poor customer service and unprofessional behavior. My supervisor and I were called in and asked for our side of the exchange. We just gave them the chat log and proof that she rejected the estimate initially sent to her. She had no color in her face after those came out and couldn't even look at him. She was given a blacklist for us and recommended other companies. The next one is an entitled People's Story. Some context that's worth knowing is that we have a small dog with a hernia, at least I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Basically, he has some issues with his back, spine, which, as long as we're careful with him, avoiding letting him jump, climb, or stress his back too much, it slowly gets better and heals. But if we're not careful, it can lead to complications that could eventually require surgery. At least that's what I've been told by my parents. Ever since then, we've been very careful with our little guy, which is why this story especially pisses me off. It was a normal day. My mom, her boyfriend, and I were planning to go on a trip with our car. We were getting all the luggage into the car while my mom had our dog on a leash and was getting him ready for the trip. Suddenly, I heard some panicked sounds from my mom and her boyfriend. I looked back and saw a dog, almost as big as ours, that was suddenly there and attacking our dog. We were all panicking because we still had our hands full and didn't know what to do. My mom's boyfriend, let's call him Jack, tried to get between the dogs and shoo the rogue dog away, cursing in the process. Luckily, the little ducker got scared of him, probably because of all the noise we made as well, lol, and ran back to its owner, who was literally on the other side of the very large parking lot. And I can't stress this enough, she was very far away and walking very casually and slowly like nothing had happened. She wasn't even calling the dog or anything. I could see she had the leash in her hand, but for some reason she didn't bother putting it on her dog until it ran back to her. Jack then started to scold her because of how irresponsible and careless she was. Not only did her dog almost harm our dog, but this was in the middle of a parking lot. What would she do if a car randomly backed out of a space without looking? I'm still so confused about how she thought this was a good idea. Also, to be clear, Jack didn't say anything insulting or call her any names. He was just telling her not to pull this kind of BS and to be more responsible. She didn't even look at him and just walked away. Not even a sorry or anything. She flat out ignored eye contact and got out of there. We all took a sigh of relief and wanted to process what had just happened. I don't know if I made this clear, but this all happened very fast. We were about to start packing again until we saw what I could only assume was her boyfriend starting to walk toward us. I think we all had a bit of an oh crap reaction when we saw him because he was doing the generic frat boy ready to throw down walk right toward us. Chest out, hands clenched up. Not long after, he said something along the lines of, "What did you say to my GF?" To Jack. I don't know if this was a smart idea, but I immediately pulled out my phone and started to record just in case he was actually about to attack Jack. Something evidence if we wanted to report this to the police. A very panicked decision on my part, lol. I don't know if it's because he saw my phone or if he got scared of Jack, who wasn't backing down and was visibly standing his ground. But when he got close enough to talk, he kinda calmed down and started to talk pretty normally. I think he assumed that when Jack was cursing at the dog, he was actually talking to his girlfriend, but there's also a chance he just wanted to find an excuse to lash out at us, to be honest. Anyway, we almost instantly made it clear that we didn't curse out his girlfriend, even though it would have been probably very justified if we had, lol. And then started to very angrily explain how what she did was insanely careless and irresponsible, and how we had a dog with medical issues that could get worse if he actually got injured in this encounter. He just kinda stood there, not knowing what to say, until he murmured something under his breath and walked off. You'd think this story ends here, right? Well, not exactly. After we were driving, and still talking about those entitled a-holes, we heard a loud car horn behind us. The car behind us then moved to the left so we could see it, and the driver pulled his hand out of the open car window and flipped someone off in our vague direction before driving off. Jack says he saw that it was the boyfriend from before, but I can't 100% confirm that since I didn't see the driver. We were a bit scared that he now knows what our car looks like and might try to do something to it, like keying it or whatever, but luckily that hasn't happened yet. Knocking on wood not to jinx it as I type. The next one is an entitled parent story. We just spent a weekend with family. We are the only couple who don't have kids. We were in a cabin with 6 children. 2 of these toddlers have major attachment issues and scream for their parents if they are not being held by mom or dad. The whole weekend revolved around these 2. Husband and I were constantly given tasks to help with them, including babysitting while mom looked after the other kid. The youngest was put down for naps in the common area, and we were constantly being told to be quiet so we don't wake him. We barely had time to ourselves and wanted to get away for a hike or swim in the lake. This never happened. Cherry on top was at the airport. Husband and I ran ahead and got through security to get away and enjoy some alone time. There was an issue at security with mom and dad, so my sister spots us sitting with our luggage and yells at us to come help. Husband ran off and I grab our luggage to see what the issue is. She left my husband with a bunch of bags, 2 screaming toddlers, and a stroller and disappeared. I come to his rescue and grab the loudest kid and try to calm him. We wind up waiting for 15 minutes with 2 screaming banshees and are getting dirty looks from everyone. My BL comes through and profusely apologizes and takes the kids. My sister comes through and barks orders for me to find some snacks for the kids as their flight is boarding soon. It's super unfair to rope us in to look after kids that aren't our responsibility. One old lady came up to us afterwards and asked if we were okay and if we knew those kids El Mayo. I said I was the auntie and she gave me this pitiful look. They're not well behaved and have attachment issues. They throw tantrums constantly. Thanks God we were on a different flight. Husband tells me after he's now having second thoughts about kids, and to be honest, so am I. We have another big family trip in October and we will be in a cruise. Sister asked what flight we are taking so we can help. Husband and I are making an action plan to make ourselves scarce and will be booking a separate flight. Update. Sister is now asking us if we can book our flight in the afternoon to help her with the kids. We booked a flight as early as possible in the morning and will not be telling her when. The next one is an entitled people's story. I learned a valuable lesson about the importance of home security cameras when I moved into an upscale neighborhood with my wife. As a black man, I didn't anticipate the discrimination we would face, especially from our neighbor. We found our dream home, complete with a beautiful pool and a spacious garden for family gatherings. Little did we know that our neighbor harbored racist beliefs and couldn't fathom 2 black people living in such a nice house. One fateful day, while enjoying a peaceful swim in our own pool, chaos erupted around me. 3 police cars screeched to a halt outside and officers stormed into my backyard, guns drawn. Fear coursed through me, as I worried that I might become another tragic headline. Trying to remain calm, I engaged with the officers. Me. What is going on, officer? Officer. We received a call about a trespasser who might be armed and dangerous. Get out of the pool now. Me. Officer, I own this house. If you follow me inside, I can show you the paperwork. As you can see, I'm wearing swim trunks and have no weapons. I won't make any sudden moves and my hands will be visible. I took these precautions because I wanted to ensure my safety and avoid any unjustified violence. Thankfully, after confirming my ownership, the officers calmed down and holstered their weapons. As they prepared to leave, my neighbor, fueled by her racist views, emerged from her house, vehemently demanding my arrest. Neighbor. Wait a minute. You have to arrest that man. He was trespassing and swimming in that pool. Officer. Ma'am, he owns the house. Please return to your property. Neighbor. He can't possibly own a nice house like that. Just look at him. It was painfully clear that she was driven by racism, using the police to harass me simply because of my skin color. Despite the officer's repeated explanations, she persisted in her prejudiced delusion. I hoped that she would resort to passive animosity, allowing us to coexist without further incidents. However, it didn't take long for her hatred to manifest in an even more threatening manner. During a peaceful Sunday brunch with my family in our garden, the neighbor scaled the fence, brandishing a gun and pointing it directly at my face. Paralyzed by fear, I couldn't help but envision my life ending abruptly. Neighbor. I've called the police again due to all this noise. This neighborhood used to be nice until you came along, turning it into some slum. I don't know what lies you told them last time, but I know you don't really own this property. Me. I don't know what you want to hear, but we legitimately purchased this house. Neighbor. Bull crap. I know you're kind. I'm confiscating this property for the town, and once the police arrive, they'll arrest you and send you back where you belong. I hope you enjoyed pretending to be high class because you'll end up in a jail cell or worse. Her gun silenced everyone, forcing us out of the garden and onto the street as we awaited the arrival of the police. One officer approached me, attentively listening to my side of the story, while another entertained the neighbor's fabricated tale. She weaved an intricate lie, accusing us of breaking into her house and attempting to rob her at gunpoint. However, unbeknownst to her, I had installed security cameras that had captured her entire vile act. Presenting the footage to the police, I exposed her lies and demonstrated how she had intruded into our garden with weapons drawn. I explained that we were peacefully enjoying lunch when she aggressively barged in. The police had grown tired of her deceit and falsehoods. They asked if I wanted to press charges. Knowing that my state allowed for the use of force in self-defense, I considered my options carefully. However, I decided to focus on justice rather than revenge. What she had done was not only harassment, but also a hate crime. I firmly pressed charges against her, determined to hold her accountable for her racist actions. Within moments, I watched as my neighbor was handcuffed and placed in the back of a police car. The officers apologized for the trouble caused, assuring us that she would no longer be a nuisance. They encouraged us to enjoy the rest of our day and assured us that they were just a phone call away if any issues arose. As the police departed, my neighbor found herself in a world of trouble. The authorities became less concerned about her false accusations and more interested in the fact that the gun she brandished wasn't legally registered to her. With no license and no credible explanation for its origin, she faced serious legal consequences. She ranted about her supposed right to bear arms, claiming she needed protection against the dangerous criminals who had moved in next door. However, her excuses fell on deaf ears. The court sentenced her to community service, hoping that this punishment would serve as a wake-up call. They warned her that any future transgressions would result in more severe consequences, including imprisonment. She begrudgingly accepted the verdict, realizing that her hateful actions had brought her to this point. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This was in my grade 11 year of high school. My computer class had a year-long substitute teacher because our amazing teacher was out for a year working on a government contract. Our previous teacher was outstanding. He had 6 different classes in our classroom, all happening at the same time. Computer repair, programming level 1, programming level 2, networking level 1, networking level 2A, and level 2B. He would give a lecture for each of the classes on a specific day of the week. Programming on Monday, repair on Tuesday, and so on. We would all work in our own groups, and everything went quite well. The next year came around, and I found out that we had a sub for the year. I had 2 back-to-back blocks in this class because I was doing 2 courses. I wandered up to the class to see what kind of teacher we were dealing with, mainly interested because I was almost certain whoever they found did not have the credentials to teach at least half of those classes. The new teacher was a foreign woman that none of us had ever heard of before. For the purpose of the story, we will call her Mrs. S. I went and found my friends to tell them what I had seen. We were all optimistic because from a very short conversation, she seemed quite informed and had a good background. It didn't last long. On the first day of class, Mrs. S introduced herself as a programming teacher who had been in school for 4 years. She went on to tell us about her programming experience in Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Access. She then told us that the programming students would not be doing the Java and C++ course we had signed up for, and would instead be doing database and Excel because those are what she learned, and she said, They will be more useful than C and Java. She also went on to suspend all lunch clubs because she didn't think high school students could be trusted with computers alone. Understandably, some of us were quite upset about that, considering that we came there to program. She also did not give the repair people or the networking people any kind of support, and completely stopped their lectures as well, preferring to let them figure it out themselves and self-teach without giving any of the resources to do so, and occasionally throwing out a test pre-written by the last teacher for her. This continued for about 2 weeks until one day she came in and said, quite irritated, that we would actually be doing the Java now unless we wanted to keep doing database. So we switched to Java, and she basically left us out to dry from there. Because she wasn't teaching database anymore, she came to harass people in computer repair. First, she told us the shop room was too messy and made us throw out 90% of our training workstations and equipment because they were not important in her eyes. Equipment that did not belong to the school but actually belonged to the other teacher. We took home what we could steal for safekeeping, but she did end up throwing out a few $1,000s worth of equipment. Then she started imposing stupid rules on us, such as, you can't have the computer on while you are troubleshooting inside because you could electrocute yourself. Or, you don't need the case open to troubleshoot motherboard lights. Or my personal favorite and the most scary, maybe you should change the power supply to 240V if you aren't getting enough power. We followed most of her stupid requests as much as we could because she threatened to lock us out of the lab room and give us only textbook work if we didn't. Needless to say, it was a challenging time. One of the students in the networking area got fed up and started doing his own coursework and lecturing to us, so that we could at least get some kind of use out of the courses. To his credit, it was all very good, but Mrs. S had the audacity to force him into doing it from there on out, and then turn around and give him low grades for not getting his own work done on time. A few months of this very uneasy balance went by, and my mother came down with colon cancer. I had already had a handful of other family members suddenly taken from me by cancer, so understandably, this was a very stressful time. I was joking with my friends and trying not to break down over the whole thing. I had a very unstable laptop running Linux that would crash if looked at funny and had a horrible habit of corrupting the OS when the battery died because the reserve shutdown sensor didn't work anymore. The battery always read 0% but would go for an hour or two. While I was working on the school desktop computer, I had a few pages open that I was taking notes in, and a Facebook tab so I could keep in contact with my mother because she was in surgery, and I was waiting for her to come out. I looked over, and the teacher was snooping through my laptop, opening folders and closing windows, and eventually pushed the power button until it shut down, which also usually corrupted anything I was doing. The following happened. Me. What the hell do you think you are doing? Mrs. S. You shouldn't be on Facebook or writing notes on a personal computer during class time, especially when your grades are slipping. Thanks for bringing that up in front of everyone. Me. That gives you no right to touch my stuff. You better hope you didn't just corrupt everything. This laptop breaks easily. Mrs. S. Then you shouldn't have it out during class. Keep that tone up and I'll see you get a detention. At this point, I am trying just to keep calm because if I get too emotional, I have a tendency to explode. This is often made worse because of my mild autism. I took a second, replied in a calmer tone. Me. I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time at home right now. My mother was diagnosed with colon cancer and I am waiting to hear back. And this is the part that really set me off, Mrs. S. You don't look like a kid whose mother has cancer. Quit making sob story excuses. Are you kidding me? It took every fiber of my body not to stand up and slap the teacher right there. I gave her the dirtiest 1,000-yard stare I think I have ever done while also trying not to burst out crying. I spoke to nobody for the rest of the day until I got home. People kept asking if I was okay and I ignored everyone. My mother was out of the hospital and home by the time I got there. I broke down crying and told her about my day. Her face was comforting, but you could see the fire of an angry woman behind her brown eyes. She told me not to worry and that it would be okay. A few weeks passed and I was called into the office for a one-on-one parent-teacher conference. Someone forgot to tell me about. There were all the teachers I had that year, good and bad. My learning assistance teacher, the VP, and the principal herself. They told me that we were there to discuss my grade slippage as soon as my mother came. My mother was about 10 minutes late, leaving me to awkwardly sit with all these people. She came in and was all smiles. Mother, Sorry I am late. I got held up at the hospital. Someone, but I'm not sure who, asked her why she was at the hospital and if everything is okay. My mother answered in her happy way. Mother, I was just getting my cancer checked on because I have cancer. The room went cold and her voice seemingly dripped with blood when she said it. My computer teacher went pale and everyone in the room gave a confused, "What on earth did you do?" look. My mother proceeded to relay how I came home crying about how I was treated to everyone present, while Mrs. S. tried to become one with the wall of the small meeting room. She kept it short, but to paraphrase, she added the following. Mother, how dare you say something so careless to my son? I hope you are ashamed, and I hope you don't get invited back for another year. She then returned back to her normal happy self and discussed my grades like nothing happened, while half the teachers were still trying to figure out what just happened. My mother told them that now she was out of the hospital, my grades should improve again. I just sat quietly the whole time and tried to suppress bursting out laughing. After that day, Mrs. S. never directly spoke to me again. She had instructions relayed through other people or gave them to the class as a whole. She did her damnedest to be nowhere near me and say nothing to me. My grades improved quite a bit, and the year ended with me passing. Mrs. S. was previously offered a job at the school as a secondary computer teacher, but after all the trouble, the job was pulled back. The next year, when our first computer teacher returned, he was furious to learn most of his equipment and personal books had been thrown out. We returned the things that we snagged during the purge, but he still lost a few $1,000s worth of personal teaching stuff. The school paid him back with $10,000, but he says he lost so much more than that in time and preset handmade equipment. We told him all about the horror show, and he gave us all an extensive test, normally given at the end of the year, which the vast majority of us failed. We ended up redoing all the computer courses from the previous year because, in his words, she didn't even teach us the basics. That sub can no longer teach in this or the neighboring districts. The next one is a petty revenge story, so I rent a house with my husband and two of our friends. It's a 5-bedroom house. Rent is outrageous in our area, $2,400 for a 1-bedroom apartment. So we found this house for $3,000. Not a bad deal while we save up to buy a house. There are other houses in the neighborhood like this as well. Our next-door neighbors have a 5-bedroom house, and they have 9 people living in it. So it is chaos over there all the time. In our neighborhood, we can choose the trash company, and it just so happens that we have the same trash company as the next-door neighbors. Our trash company wants us to have the trash out by 7 a.m. We don't always get it out that early, though, and that's where this problem started. Most of the time, they don't pick up our trash until 11 a.m., so as long as the trash is out before the trash pickup arrives, they can take our trash. The people next door have 3 trash cans, and they are overflowing every single week. They put their trash out the night before, but unfortunately our neighborhood has raccoons and foxes, so the trash is always getting into it. Last time a raccoon got into their trash and left a mess in our yard, but they wouldn't pick it up. I was pretty pissed about it, but I just let it go and cleaned up their trash. I did put it back in their trash can, and they just sat out front glaring at me while I did that. Here is where the incident started. A couple of weeks ago, I didn't get our trash out until almost 9 a.m. All 4 of us were sick with COVID. I was on the mend and feeling a little bit better, but I slept in and forgot to put out the trash at 7 a.m. So I went to put the trash out, and my neighbor started yelling at me, saying, "You were supposed to have your trash out by 7 a.m. You can't put your trash out now." I said, "Well, they haven't come to pick up the trash because your trash cans are full, so it's not a big deal." He said, "No, that's the rule. Your trash has to be out by 7 a.m. If it's not, you can't get your trash picked up this week." I said, "I understand that they want the trash out by 7 a.m., but they haven't come to pick it up yet, so it doesn't matter." I went ahead and walked inside. I went back to bed, and a couple of hours later I got up to see that our trash cans were put to the side of the house, and they were still full of trash. That means someone moved our trash cans. Our other neighbor came up to me the next day and said that she saw him put our trash can back. She didn't know the situation, so she wasn't going to butt in and tell him not to do that. Our neighbors are also very proud of their last name. They literally have a flag in their front window with their last name. So, I called the trash company and said that I was Mrs. So-and-so and needed to set up a vacation hold for our upcoming pickup. They said, "No problem, we won't pick up your trash next week." They only asked for the address, no other information. The next week, I made sure that our trash was out at 6:45 a.m. Then I sat and watched for the trash truck, and I saw them come past the house. They drove past my neighbor's house, didn't pick up their trash even though it was overflowing, picked up ours and the other few people who also had them, and left. I know I'm an a-hole for doing this, you don't need to tell me. I may have crossed the line, but he also crossed the line by touching our cans, moving them, and setting foot on our property. I'm adding an edit to mention that our lease is up at the end of this month, so we won't be dealing with these crazies for much longer. And if they mess with the house, good. My slumlord can deal with it. The next one is an entitled people story. I-17F feels so humiliated, I can't believe I'm writing this. So a couple of days ago, I went on a walk with my baby to a park. On the way back, I was pretty hungry and stopped by this cafe for a quick bite and ordered a soup. I paid and sat at a table, then the baby got fussy, and I knew it was time for her to eat. I had a bottle packed, but realized I accidentally left it at home, so I just gave her the boob. Then I heard a lady say, "Are you serious?" I didn't think anyone was talking to me, so I minded my own business because that's what you do when nobody's bothering you. Then I felt someone harshly tapping on my shoulder, and the same lady said, "Excuse me?" Annoyed that someone was hitting my shoulder, I turned around and said, "Excuse you?" Karen replied, "That's inappropriate. You need to stop." I responded, "Stop what?" She said, "Are you ducking stupid? Of course you are. That's probably why you have a baby so young." That was a good one. I'll give her that. She mentioned something about this being a public place and how she didn't like that I was exposing myself in front of her husband, who was sitting at the table next to us, watching his wife act stupid. She suggested I go to the bathroom to take care of that or something, and that I shouldn't bring a newborn baby, my baby is obviously too big to be a newborn, out in public anyway because of corona and stuff. She wasn't even wearing a mask and was all up in my face, so obviously not that concerned about corona. I wasn't going to the bathroom because that's weird, and I wasn't leaving because I was waiting for my soup. I tried to politely tell her that I'm not leaving, and if she's worried about corona, she should back up away from me and my baby, and everyone can mind their own business like normal people. She said, "Okay, I'm telling." How mature. She walked off, and I looked over at her husband, and he said, "You should be more modest." I just cringed at him and looked away because I'm not about to argue with a grown man. The manager eventually came over and said I needed to stop or leave. I was kind of mind blown because I thought kicking someone out for breastfeeding was illegal, but apparently not. I said, "Well, she's hungry, and she's going to cry if I stop, and I'm not leaving because I'm waiting for my soup, which they said would take 20 minutes because of something going on or whatever, and at this point there would be about 15 minutes left, so, can I get a refund?" He said they don't do refunds, but can give me restaurant credit like a gift card or something. But I'm definitely not going back there, so I won't need that. And I just left. Of course, Karen mumbled a few things about me being a slut or whatever to the manager, and I told her to shut up. Then she started screaming, but I walked out the door before I could hear her tirade on me, and the manager stopped her from following me. By the way, I'm in Los Angeles, which isn't a really conservative area. But yeah, that was my first experience with a Karen. The next one is an entitled parent story. Our household always revolved around money, even though my mom made more than enough money, and we were not struggling by any means. She complained about every single thing she had to buy for us, everything. Food, clothes, medical expenses, toys, laptops, phones, school costs, everything. We always knew exactly how much we were costing her. We didn't dare ask for unnecessary things like leisure activities, expensive toys, or hobby supplies. We started working very young, and she manipulated and guilted us into giving her all the money we earned to pay off what we owed. When I turned 18, she completely cut me off financially, but kindly offered to let me rent my bedroom out from her, and sent me an invoice of every cent I've ever cost her, totaling over $700,000. She billed me for Christmas and birthday presents. She even billed me for her medical expenses during the pregnancy and delivery, and wanted me to back pay rent to live in the house from birth. She did the same to my sister 2 years later when she turned 18. We were supposed to pay her back over time starting the day we turned 18. Both of us were still dealing with a lot of internalized guilt from her constant manipulation, so we actually did pay for a while. Aside from necessary expenses, our entire paychecks were going to her. We rented our bedrooms in her house, and she separated her food, cleaning supplies, cookware, and tableware from ours and charged us to use them. She generously included the use of the household appliances in our rent. It wasn't until I was 21 and my sister was 19 that enough people had told us this whole arrangement was unhinged that we finally snapped out of it. We moved out together and have stopped paying our mom, or even contacting her at all. The next one is an entitled people's story. Moving out of our cramped apartment in Midtown to the suburban neighborhood was a dream come true for my wife and me. We yearned for a larger space to start a family, and the prospect of a 4-bedroom house was enticing. The extra rooms would be perfect for my writing studio and my wife's tailoring projects, which always seemed to sprawl across every available surface. But what truly sealed the deal was the presence of a pool, an oasis we could escape to during sweltering summer days. After navigating the labyrinth of paperwork, we finally settled into our new home. With the vastness of the house before us, it became evident that our belongings barely made a dent in filling the space. The remnants of our 1-bedroom apartment seemed minuscule against the backdrop of the expansive lounge and empty bedrooms. And so, we embarked on countless shopping trips to Walmart and Bed Bath & Beyond, eagerly seeking items to furnish our newfound haven. Little did we know that our zealous consumerism would create a financial burden. We acquired countless unnecessary things, succumbing to the allure of the American market. Amidst the stress of transforming our house into a home, we began to acquaint ourselves with our neighbors. City life had taught me to keep my distance, but the suburban camaraderie was infectious, and I was gradually adapting to this newfound friendliness. While we made acquaintances with several neighbors, I rarely encountered those living closest to us. One side was occupied by a frequent traveler, always exploring foreign lands, and the other was an elderly woman I occasionally spotted tending to her exquisite garden. Her well-manicured flower beds drew admiration, but our interactions were limited to a few polite greetings. Curiously, during neighborhood events, the conversation inevitably revolved around Karen, a neighbor whom the previous homeowner had deemed troublesome. Intrigued, I awaited an encounter with Karen myself. Months flew by, and winter cast its enchanting spell over the neighborhood. Waking up to the picturesque sight of snow-covered streets reaffirmed our decision to move. The local association organized a delightful Christmas street party, bedecking the area with twinkling lights and offering warm mulled wine. The festivities allowed me to further acquaint myself with the neighbors, all of whom seemed eager to discuss Karen's reputation. Intrigued, I wondered what awaited me in my encounters with her. As summer approached, my wife and I continued our furniture shopping excursions, but we also decided it was time to prepare the nursery. Though not yet ready to have a child, we believed it prudent to have everything in order for when the time came. It was during one of our routine Walmart trips that the events took an unexpected turn. Returning home, our minds filled with thoughts of relaxation and trashy TV, a faint sound caught my attention. Investigating the source, I discovered Karen swimming laps in our modest pool. Even though my city mentality urged me to dismiss it as a normal occurrence, my wife assured me otherwise. Confronting Karen, I voiced my disapproval at her audacity to make herself at home in our backyard. She claimed that the previous owner had allowed her to use the pool, but I knew better. I firmly expressed my boundaries and told her I didn't appreciate strangers helping themselves to my property. The situation escalated quickly, and Karen's furious tirade accompanied her hurried exit from the pool, her towel comically threatening to trip her at every step. "You'll regret this," she yelled, her face reddened with anger. "The police will come and sort you out." The commotion attracted a few of our curious neighbors, who came over to witness the spectacle. They shared knowing looks and whispered, "So you've had the pleasure of meeting Karen, huh?" I couldn't help but feel a mix of amusement and frustration at the situation. However, Karen's threats didn't end with her dramatic exit. Just when we thought the incident was behind us, our peaceful haven became the stage for a series of bizarre events. Our fake flower bed was upturned, likely a mischievous act of raccoons or other nocturnal creatures. We shrugged it off as gardening was not our forte anyway, but things took a more unsettling turn when we found our laundry dumped into the swimming pool, followed by our bikes mysteriously ending up in the same watery grave. It became evident that Karen was behind these acts of vandalism, but without concrete proof, it was a frustrating game of cat and mouse. Determined to catch her in the act, I decided to set up a webcam by the upstairs window, serving as our makeshift security system. Days passed, and the atmosphere remained eerily quiet, leading me to believe that perhaps Karen had given up on her campaign of harassment. That is, until the day my wife and I returned home from a visit to the fertility clinic. As we stepped into the backyard, my wife let out a blood-curdling scream. I rushed to her side and followed her trembling finger, pointing towards something floating in the pool. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and anger. Finally, we had caught Karen red-handed. Without hesitation, I called the police, explaining that I had irrefutable evidence of Karen's trespassing and property damage. When the officer arrived later that evening, I recognized him as the same one from our previous encounter. We briefly exchanged pleasantries, catching up on the events of the past few months, before I eagerly presented the footage from the webcam. The officer's eyes widened in disbelief as he watched Karen sneak into our backyard, take a leisurely lap around the pool, and then commit the unthinkable act of defecation right in the water. It was a grotesque sight, and I was both appalled and relieved that our suspicions had been confirmed. With the evidence in hand, the officer wasted no time. Karen was taken into custody and brought to the police station for questioning. Subsequent investigations revealed that she suffered from mental health issues, which contributed to her erratic behavior. It was determined that she required professional care and would be transferred to a suitable facility. While a pang of guilt tugged at my conscience for the repercussions she faced, the overwhelming feeling was one of vindication. Finally, our peaceful suburban dream could be restored, and we could live without fear of sabotage or intrusion. The next one is a pro-revenge story. My husband and I are in our late 30s and child-free. Some people on the child-free subreddit said I should post here too, so enjoy the saga. My husband and I had been saving up for almost a decade to move to a tropical paradise. About 2 years ago, we bit the bullet and moved to our dream location. Housing here is super expensive, like Hawaii prices, so all we could afford was half of a duplex. It is beautiful, and on the water with places for our boat. Unfortunately, Karen, Billy Bob, the boyfriend, and her 3 gremlins live in the other unit. Setup. There is some period of time we just went for a week here and there, but we live here full-time now. The entire duplex was owned by an older gentleman who rented out both sides. The sides do not match at all. One side is a 5-bedroom, 3-bath. The other side of the duplex is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. We bought the 5-bedroom. On our side of the property, we have 90% of the backyard, a gazebo and dockage, about $150, since it is on a corner. The other side has a small backyard, patio, and maybe 15 out of dockage. The rental leases say the renters are entitled to their specific backyards, but there were no fences or anything, so all the renters shared the entire backyard. After we bought the house, Karen immediately tried to throw her weight around that they expected to continue with that privilege. I told her if she asked politely, we would try to accommodate her. She thought this meant she could use our backyard whenever she wanted. Party incident. One day, my husband and I are enjoying some drinks outside when a delivery truck shows up to set up a giant blow-up thing in our backyard. I asked Karen what she thought she was doing, and she said it was her kid's birthday. Then she had the gall to say it was a family and friends only event, so we had to stay inside our house. Not wanting to be a total a-hole and ruin some little girl's birthday, I told Karen that after this, she had no access to our backyard, period. Karen shrugged and kept setting up for the party. During the party, a drunk adult wandered into our house, which shocked us all. I said Karen's house is on the other side, and he said, "Oh, Karen said she owned the whole property and to use whichever bathroom was available." I directed him to Karen's bathroom, and soon after, she came storming into our house, screaming about how dare we make her look bad to her friends, and how selfish we are that we couldn't even spare one bathroom. She said we didn't deserve all this space with just us. I told Karen to get the hell out of my house or I would be calling the cops. She finally left and the party wrapped up shortly after. Backyard remodel. After the party incident, we decided we needed to clearly define the backyard and build a fence. While we were spending the money, we decided to update the patio, put in a fire pit, and an outdoor kitchen. While the contractor was on site, nosy Karen had to come investigate. Since the fence would be the last thing built, I was vague and just stuck to telling her about the patio update. You could see her face light up because, of course, in her mind, what's ours is hers. When the workers started on the fence, Karen came out screaming for the work to stop. I went outside and told the workers to keep working and told Karen to butt out. Of course, in true Karen fashion, she called the cops. What happened next was hilarity on my part after explaining to the cop that we were building a fence on our property and the landlord, of which Karen was not, knew about it. When the cop gave Karen a stern lecture, I thought her head was going to explode. She went back into her house and slammed the sliding door so hard it sounded like something cracked. We got our fence, and I thought that would be the end, but of course not. The boat incident. One day, Billy Bob entered the picture, and he was as much a terrible neighbor as Karen. He would throw cigarette butts and empty beer cans over our fence for disrespecting his woman. I didn't know Paradise had trailer trash, but Billy Bob is the epitome of the stereotype. Billy Bob has a boat. A 30 fishing boat, to be precise. Of course, that side of the duplex only has 15 of dockage. Since we have so much dockage and only one boat, we rent out the other dockage spots as month to month. People come and go, so if we don't receive rent from them by the end of the month and the boat disappears, we think nothing of it. We had a renter who tied up their boat on the property line, but Billy Bob wanted to park his boat and needed that space. Karen and Billy Bob posed as us. We were out of town. Told the renters to be gone at the end of the month, and then parked Billy Bob's boat on the dockage. I only found out about it weeks later because the renter left a nasty review on the rental site we use. They said we were rude, and went back on the verbal agreement to let them stay for 3 more months. I was like, what the duck is all this? After a phone call, I quickly put 2 and 2 together. I called the cops who told Karen and Billy Bob they need to move their boat, or it would be towed. The equivalent of it anyway. Karen and Billy Bob started screaming the boat is fully on their property. It isn't. Then changed to no one can own the water. True, but a seawall is deeded. That we are liars. And at some point, Billy Bob punched a cop and went to jail. I felt bad for the cops, so took them all snacks the next day with a note apologizing for neighbor drama. I ended up winning my small claims suit against them for lost rental income, but of course, haven't seen a dime. I eventually convinced the dockage renters to come back and gave them a few months free as compensation. Final revenge. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Get ready for a juicy justice boner. So with the collapsing market, we were trying to figure out what to do with our savings when a perfect opportunity opened up. The landlord who owned both properties was in desperate need of some cash and was tired of managing the property from 2,000 miles away. Because of course Karen is a Karen and called him weekly for every little thing. His only stipulation was we let the poor single mom who has been his renter for 8 years finish her lease, which is up in July. Since we just have money, we were trying to reinvest. And because now we get to control our neighbors, heck yeah, we jumped on that. Since we didn't need a realtor or mortgage, and an inspection had been done just a year ago for the old landlord to refinance, everything closed in just under 2 weeks. Karen was aware of a change of ownership. We registered the property under an LLC but didn't know who until 8 days ago. I went over to Karen's house and knocked on the door. Karen answered with a, "What the duck do you want, idiot?" I smiled, handed her our landlord information, and sweetly reminded her rent was due by Friday, but she could just hand me the check if that was easier. I've always heard descriptions of people's faces turning white, but this was the first time I have actually seen it. I told Karen that we are honoring her lease until the end of July, but afterward, she had better make plans to move because we intend to remodel it before the next tenants moved in. Bye, idiot. Edit. A lot of people misunderstood the beginning. Let's call our side of the duplex Duplex OP. The other duplex is Duplex Karen. We purchased Duplex OP. After we bought it, Duplex OP was no longer a rental. Both Duplex OP and Duplex Karen were for sale independently, but we only had the money to buy Duplex OP. Duplex Karen is still a rental because it has never sold. Now, we own both Duplex OP and Duplex Karen. Duplex Karen is still a rental. Duplex OP is still not a rental. When we made property improvements to Duplex OP, it was ours and not a rental. Update 1. Not much to update, folks. Karen and family's lease isn't up until the end of July. Rent has been paid on time. As far as I know, she doesn't have a new place lined up. We've served her 30-day notice we will not be renewing the lease. We also offered in writing that we will prorate July and waive the termination fee if they want to leave before the end of the lease. Beyond the near-weekly loud parties and having to call the police because the kids were throwing lit fireworks at our boat, not much beyond the norm. Update 2, long story short, Karen and family are still in the place and not paying any rent. They were served with eviction, but due to COVID stuff, we can't actually do anything about it. At least Karen and Billy Bob had a giant fight, which ended up in him being arrested and he hasn't returned. I've been told by our lawyer that once some laws are removed in September, we can have the police escort them off the property that day since we've already filed the eviction. It's just a crap show right now. Karen is being extra smug. She tried pushing her bounds and kept coming over to our property. A talk with the cops set her straight, but she's playing music loud and just tossing her trash everywhere. We really wanted to move our elderly parents in after a quick remodel because Dad needs shoulder surgery badly and Mom now needs a walker. They need more care, and it's getting harder driving 2 hours a day to do that. Our parents want their own space though and won't live on our side with us. My husband and I are trying not to be angry and make things worse with Karen, but we are both exhausted. Things just suck. Update 3. Life is weird. Karen is still here. Since we couldn't evict her, my partner went to stay with their parents for a few months, so in-laws could get the surgery care they needed. They are doing better now, which is great. Here's the weird part, though. In October, Karen's mother, Susan, came to live with her since Susan's landlord chose not to renew her lease. Susan is an angel. Susan was mortified at Karen's and the kids' behavior. Susan is a tough one and has been cleaning house, both figuratively and literally. The kids are so much better behaved, and Karen stomps around like a sullen child. Susan and I share drinks every few days in the backyard. We bake together too every weekend. For Thanksgiving and Christmas, since no one was traveling for the holidays, we made a big feast and set it up outside with some backyard games. It was a great time, and even Karen was being pleasant. I tried to tell Susan not to worry about rent until they find another place, but she insisted on paying. I lied about how much the rent was, so it's only a half payment, but it just covers the taxes insurance. We drew up another lease that is month to month. Susan wants to move back home at some point and take her daughter with her. Karen, I think, is ready for a change too, but obviously with COVID it might take some time. It's pretty pleasant right now though, so I'm in no hurry for them to leave. The next one is a petty revenge story. Pretty great story from work this morning, where I got to one-up this guy. So I'll start by saying I work for my dad at his store. I work the front counter and interact with most people, customers. Also, I look a lot more like my mom. My dad runs a separate business as well, but anybody who needs to talk to him for either business can usually find him in the office here. So this guy shows up this morning looking pretty ruffled and asks if my dad was here. I replied, "You just missed him, he's out for the morning doing a couple of things." He was very displeased by this information and was acting very loud, unprofessional. He started looking around the store and eventually came back to the front counter with a piece of equipment that he wanted to trade for some work that he apparently did for him before. Keep in mind, I know most of my dad's workers and have never seen this guy before. I told him that I don't do any negotiations while he's not here, and I can't just let him leave the store with something for free. I told him that normally he probably wouldn't want to take that route, but he was welcome to discuss it with him once he's back. He looked at me and replied, "You're making a big mistake here, and you must not know Name very well because he would do this for me and blah blah blah." I just looked at him and replied, "I actually do know him quite well, seeing as he is my father." I told him that he could either leave or wait for my dad to get back. He kind of looked up at me and was pretty speechless. I could tell he felt stupid and regretted his comment. He ended up waiting around in his truck for my dad to show up, and guess what? He wasn't going to do a trade. It's almost like I know my boss well. Apparently the guy just worked like 2 days for him and then quit. Plus, the thing he wanted was way more expensive than what he was owed. Side note, the pay wasn't made yet because we are bi-weekly. I swear some of the people around here are nuts, but a petty "don't you know who I am" moment made my day. The next one is an entitled people story. My ex-friend is commonly called a Karen. She's very entitled and has a bad habit of actually screaming for managers over the smallest things. I've watched this 35-year-old woman scream, "Get me the manager, Oregon, I will call the cops," at a restaurant because the waiter accidentally gave her iced tea instead of sweet tea. What are the cops gonna do? I don't want to use the name Karen because it's overused already, so let's call her E, and I used to be friends. I can't remember why. She comes off as sweet and caring, but she's the most entitled person I have ever met. E also struggles with fertility and is desperate for children. She tried to adopt a child, but because of her mental health problems and unstable lifestyle of hotel hopping, she was denied. She doesn't have a job, she's technically homeless, her boyfriend is a 21-year-old douchebag, and she tends to hoard animals that all die in unusual circumstances. Her last cat died mysteriously at only 2 years old and was perfectly healthy. I was there when she adopted him and heard the vet state he was healthy. Suddenly he dies and she claims it was heart disease, then claims it was a seizure, then claims it was kidney problems, then says that he somehow flew across the room and purposely aimed into the wall. Yeah, a little suspicious. My other friend Kara did call animal control on her and found she had 6 rats, 5 hamsters, 1 dog, and 4 cats. She claimed all of them were emotional support animals and that they were medical equipment, and taking them away would be against the law. Big yikes, she's not well. A while ago, she was saying how desperate she is to have children and was talking about looking for a surrogate. She wanted someone to carry a child for her for free with a list of demands for the surrogate. All for free. Now we all but her know that crap ain't free. Human incubators aren't a free service, and mistreating anyone in that job is a good way to be in a legal battle. I listened because, well, me explaining the truth to her would be like me placing my head in a garbage disposal, completely pointless and 100% painful. I made a comment about how one day uterine transplants might become more successful and more common and how great that would be. I brought it up because I'm not entirely in love with my uterus. I don't plan on ever having children, and I'm not against the idea of uterine donation. I still cannot find a doctor that will take away my baby-making abilities because I'm too young to make such a decision. I'm 27. I feel like if I wanted to change my mind, I would have before now. Not the point, sorry. I made the joke of me wanting to donate my uterus to someone who needs, and deserves it, since I have no plans on using its baby-holding abilities. That's when E says, "Yeah, then I would have you give me your uterus so I could finally have a child." Now I thought she was joking. I truly believed this was a joke. It wasn't. E and I had a falling out, thank goodness, and I thought we could just part ways quietly. Yeah, she had other plans. She posts all over Facebook and pings me saying I had made a legal agreement to give her my uterus or to be her surrogate. Never once did I say such things, and now she has her friends after me, harassing me in DMs for giving her false hope and mental anguish. E is threatening to sue me for my uterus and for causing extra trauma by not following through. I'm just confused and baffled. I'm also curious, how can she afford a lawyer if she can't afford food for her many animals? Are lawyers suddenly cheaper than I recall? But also, last time I checked, you can't be sued to give up a body part, can you? Especially if no legal agreement was ever made, right? I'm lucky to have a lawyer family friend. He's agreed to help set me up with a meeting with a colleague of his if this turns serious. It's doubtful it will, but E is definitely having a public meltdown over our friendship ending. Oh, and yeah, I wish this was a fake story. I wish I was lying here. This person is not mentally sound and she has threatened people over the ridiculous things. This isn't a new behavior for her. In the past, she threatened to call CPS on someone online over a disagreement. She bragged about doxing the person's address to me and boasted about calling CPS on them for spending more time disagreeing with E than watching their child. This person E was threatening was a mother of a 14-year-old. It wasn't like the mother was neglecting attention to an infant or toddler or young child. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I would find myself entangled in a battle against my own homeowners association. The neighborhood was known for its strict rules and the homeowner association's intimidating tactics to enforce them. It felt like they were the playground bullies, and we were the helpless victims, forced to comply or face the consequences. People were afraid to speak up, fearing the loss of their homes. I was one of them until a fateful incident changed everything. Last year, during Halloween, the homeowner association enforced regulations on decorations, forbidding anything they deemed satanic. It was just one example of their excessive control. But my story with the homeowner association began when my son had an accident, leaving me burdened with medical bills. Faced with the choice between paying the homeowner association fees on time or covering my son's medical expenses, the decision was clear. Family always comes first. I reached out to the homeowner association, explaining my situation, hoping they would understand the slight delay in payment. Instead, their response was cold and unsympathetic. They not only piled on daily late fees, but also criticized my financial choices. I reluctantly paid the exorbitant fees, costing me over $1,000 for a $250 payment. I wanted to move on and avoid any further trouble, but they weren't done with me yet. A month later, I received another bill demanding an additional payment, even though I had already settled my debt. They threatened to foreclose on my house if I failed to comply. The amount they demanded, $5,000, was astronomical, and I didn't have that kind of money. The fear of losing my home gripped me, despite having paid them what I owed. It was during this desperate time that a compassionate coworker noticed my distress and recommended a lawyer who offered a free consultation. I shared my situation, and the lawyer assured me that the homeowner association was violating the law and that I could sue them. Suddenly, my timid self disappeared, replaced by a newfound determination. With legal support, I felt empowered to confront the homeowner association. My lawyer explained the legalities involved, how the homeowner association's own bylaws allowed a 1-month grace period for residents with a consistent payment history. They had no right to impose the initial late fees. Furthermore, their debt collection practices were unlawful, amounting to harassment. So, armed with a countersuit, we went to court, ready to face the homeowner association's smug board members. The homeowner association thought they had the upper hand, believing they could foreclose on my house and profit from it. They presented their case to the judge, citing their bylaws and even insinuating that my actions would cause problems in the neighborhood. But then, my lawyer presented our countersuit and provided evidence of my payment history. The judge had questions for me, seeking the truth amidst the conflicting claims. Judge, did you make a payment on first date to the homeowner association? Me, no, Your Honor. Judge, why did you miss your payment? Me, my son's medical emergency required that money for his treatment. Judge, did you pay the homeowner association on second date? Me, yes, Your Honor. I have the check record as proof. My well-documented payment record caught the homeowner association off guard, shattering their deceitful facade. The dominoes began to fall, one by one, exposing their inappropriate debt collection practices and harassment. The judge ruled in my favor, declaring the homeowner association guilty. Not only did I get back the money I had already paid, but I also received a significant cash settlement from the homeowner association. The victory was bittersweet, as it meant putting this ordeal behind me and securing a brighter future for my son's college fund. The impact of this case extended beyond my personal gain. The neighborhood witnessed the fallibility of the once untouchable homeowner association. People realized that standing up against injustice was possible, and that the homeowner association's power had limits. Faced with the potential for massive settlements, the homeowner association started to back off, realizing the consequences of their actions. While I firmly believe in fulfilling financial obligations, I also advocate for empathy and understanding. This entire situation could have been avoided if the homeowner association had simply considered the temporary delay in payment or listened to my explanation. Instead, they pushed me to the edge, forcing me to fight back, and ultimately, their own greed destroyed them. To all those who read my story, remember that even the smallest individual can triumph over the biggest bully. They may try to intimidate you, but your determination can overcome their power. Stand up, fight back, and reclaim your rights. Victory is possible for those who refuse to be silenced. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This story is about my grandfather and how he outsmarted his brother after his brother exploited their mother. About 40 years ago, my great-grandparents were dying. Great-grandfather was gone, and great-grandmother was on her way out, abusing morphine to lessen the pain. She was writing a will when she was sober, but she was rarely sober. Her estate was essentially what would be a multi-millionaire's estate adjusted for inflation. Her estate was in Ireland, while my grandfather and his brother were in England. My grandfather went to his local pub to see his brother. He did this every Saturday night to keep in touch with him. This time, something was different. His brother was not there. Instead, his brother spontaneously moved to Ireland and spent time with their mother, who was heavily on morphine. The morphine was clouding her judgment, and bear in mind she was writing a will. My grandfather's brother, we'll call him Lee from now on, went to Ireland to cozy up to their mother in hopes of getting her whole estate. My grandfather didn't know Lee was doing this and didn't think much of it. Fast forward about a year, and great-grandmother passes away. Funeral day arrives and everything goes fine until they get to the will. Great-grandmother was high on morphine when she made the will, and everything she had in the will went to Lee. Nobody else got anything in the will. Putting two and two together, everyone was pissed off at Lee, but the will couldn't be contested because there were people who signed as witnesses, including her attorney. Lee becomes an outcast, but everyone gives up on trying to save their mother's things except for my granddad. Lee inherited a large plot of land in rural Ireland. Nothing special, except that it couldn't support a septic tank and was worth a fortune. The house on this plot was right on the edge of the land, but the septic tank was on the neighbor's land. Lee didn't know this, so he didn't buy the land next to the house. This doesn't meet building code requirements, so the house can't be sold until the septic tank is on his land. My grandfather knew this and bought the land surrounding the house. Lee fixed up the house and got a building inspector to check if it met the building code so he could sell it. The inspector noticed the septic tank and informed Lee that he couldn't sell the house unless the tank was on his land. Lee went to the neighbors to buy the small plot of land with the septic tank, only to find out they sold it to my grandfather, who was unwilling to sell it to Lee. Lee had invested easily over £300,000 before Ireland switched to the euro in the house, so the house was in great shape and was supposed to be resold. However, Lee couldn't sell the house for a profit because my grandfather owned the land with the septic tank. On the other hand, Lee couldn't put a septic tank on his land because it couldn't support one. My grandfather had put Lee in checkmate, where Lee had to sell the land and everything on it to my granddad. My grandfather wasn't going to buy the land for anything more than £5,000, and to this day, Lee still won't sell it to my grandfather. My grandfather didn't want the land, he just wanted to return the favor to Lee. Now Lee is just scraping by on his plot of land because of his stubbornness, and he still, to this day, won't accept defeat. The next one is a petty revenge story. So I have lived in a townhouse for the last 3 years. I live with my husband and two 60-pound dogs. For a bit of background, I got attacked by a dog just before my neighbors moved in 2.5 years ago, which left me with a fear of strange animals. However, recently I was able to work through my trauma with my therapist. My neighbors have 4 loud and reactive dogs, 3 Chihuahuas and 1 Australian Shepherd. They charge the fence whenever they see someone on the other side and bark constantly. This has prevented me from using my backyard for the last 2 summers. Now that I have worked past the panic attacks and fear, I spend a majority of weekends in my yard and let my dogs go back and forth freely. My dogs have been well socialized and don't have any interest in the fence when the other dogs are reacting. Up until yesterday when the neighbors' dogs came out, I would bring my dogs inside, but it would still take a minute or so for their dogs to calm down. I would let my dogs back outside to play when the neighbors went back in. This was no big deal to me. Now, cue Sunday. The neighbors let their dogs out, they react, I bring my dogs in, same old routine. Except my neighbor curses me under her breath, saying, "Keep your ducking door shut." This is not the first time they have been rude either. This gets under my skin considering her dog's reactivity is the reason I did not feel comfortable in my own backyard, and it is not my dogs who are reactive. Plus, I have always been the one to bring my dogs in, not the neighbor. So I've started to be a bit petty. Now when the neighbor lets their dogs out, I stay out and play fetch with my dogs while her animals are going apeshit, instead of bringing my dogs inside as I have always done. My dogs love it because they are getting more exercise than before. It's only been 3 days and my neighbor is exasperated and has to chase her dogs around the garden. Side note, they have another dog on the opposite side of them which they are equally reactive to as well. I have patio furniture being delivered tomorrow and I fully expect to enjoy my yard to the fullest this summer. After a week or 2, I'll probably put up a visual blockade so her dogs can't see mine to be nice. But I'm not going to restrict my well-trained animals for her untrained ones any longer. If she doesn't appreciate my courtesy, I won't give it. Update. The neighbors decided to cuss me out and tell me to go inside last night. I said no, but put the dogs inside because the neighbors were being aggressive. They said our dogs should be able to be outside too, so I should go inside. I replied that their dog's reactivity is not my problem, and they are more than welcome to use their yard. The fact that they can't stop charging the fence long enough to piss is their issue, and I stood in the middle of my yard. They shouted at me to get the duck inside. I told them make me, a bit childish, I know. One told me to meet them out front, and I said no, if you want something from me, climb over this fence yourself. They yelled a bit more, but I didn't respond, and they went inside after a minute. I think the neighbors have finally cracked a bit, and it's only week 1. I'm not proud and honestly don't want to deal with this nonsense, but I'm not going to bend to a bully. The next one is an entitled people story. This is such a mess. Many people here commented about what my cousin would probably do in retaliation, and I was naive about it because they were exactly right. I last posted on Reddit about my cousin who gave me a junk beach cruiser bike out of his parents' backyard when my mountain bike got stolen. I cleaned up and fixed up the beach cruiser, and then suddenly my cousin wanted me to either pay him $60 for it or give it back because he wanted to sell it after I made it pretty. But the rest of the family, including his parents, basically told him to grow up when he tried to get them involved. Then he found out about my AIDA post. One of his friends apparently saw it and told him, either here or on a podcast or something, I don't know. But word spread around. The whole family found out because my cousin ranted to them, but none of them are angry with me. They actually sympathized with me for even feeling like I had to make the AIDA post to begin with when my cousin was so clearly in the wrong. My cousin ended up freaking out over it and confronting me on my way home from work. This time he demanded even more money for the bike. He said that since I love Reddit so much, he was taking an a-hole tax for humiliating him, and the cost of the bike was now $80. He ranted about how paying him $80 for the bike was the least I could do after I humiliated him. I refused and said that he was acting like a grifter, and the bike was hardly worth anything. I put in effort to make it rideable, while he let it rot in his parents' backyard for years. It was junk when I started, and I made it work. Then I listed all the things I did to fix it and how much it would have cost the bike shop to fix it instead. He somehow still didn't see my point and still stated he wanted the money now, or he'd be taking the bike back whether I liked it or not. I told him I was done with this and tried to ride off, but he grabbed me and pulled both me and the bike over before I could ride away. I said, "What the hell, man?" while I was getting up, and then he actually slugged me in the face. It didn't break my nose, but really freaking hurt, and it made me bleed. Then he took my bike and rode off with it. I'm older than my cousin by 2 years, and taller too, but he's built way sturdier than me since his father is a bit of a husky and strong guy, and he inherited that body type, so he had no problem knocking me down and robbing me. Someone came over to help me up, and then I called the cops. Family or no family, I wasn't about to just let him get away with doing that to me. And the altercation happened right in front of a shop with CCTV, which the cops later got video from. I got taken to the hospital to have my face checked, and my cousin was arrested by police at his apartment. He had the bike there too, and had even already listed it for sale online, but took it down later. Thanks to something someone commented on my last post, I documented the serial numbers of the bike by photographing them and writing them down at home. So I got my bike back from the police without much issue. My cousin tried to tell the police the bike was still his, but I had texts on my phone from back when he said I could have it, and lots of other text evidence of the harassment that followed. Plus, his parents were there when he gave the bike to me, and the whole family knew he'd tried to grift me. So he surrendered it, and the bike was returned to me at the station. My boss gave me a couple of days off work to recover. The injury to my nose was thankfully minor, so I'm doing fine. My cousin didn't get off easy, though. After he was arrested, he was found to have been drinking. So now he's been charged with theft, assault, and underage drinking since he's not 21 yet. He called his parents to come bail him out, but they refused after finding out what he did to me. They came to see me after a couple of days and were extremely apologetic. They said they had no idea he'd do such a jerk move to me. They also said he'd been asking for money a lot lately, and likely was spending that all on his habits. None of us have any idea where he got the alcohol or what kind of long-term punishment he's in for, but I doubt he's going to get off very lightly from this when he goes to court. I did get questioned about whether or not I can press charges, but the police already have the video of the assault and theft, and my cousin is still getting charged for underage drinking, so no one is really asking me to try and speak on his behalf. I don't really want to either, and since I waited a few days longer to post this, my cousin is now out of jail. and his parents have learned from him that he was also behind on rent, and is now facing eviction since his lease was month to month. He was also fired from his job for being a no-show since he was stuck in jail for a few days. One of my friends works in that same place too, and my cousin had already been on thin ice for bad behavior, a lot of tardiness, and repeatedly not showing up for work. So getting arrested was the last straw for his boss, and he was fired. So now he's looking at misdemeanor charges, has no job, and is getting evicted. All because he had to be a jerk and a grifter. From what my parents and his parents tell me, he acted like everything was all my fault, but his parents have shut that down and chewed him out over the fact that he beat me up and stole from me. And this is karma for that. Then they made him promise to leave me alone from here on out. I've heard his parents aren't going to be letting him move back into his old room either. Instead, they plan on putting him up in the loft above their garage, which isn't exactly roomy. Has plywood walls, and there's no AC up there for the summer heat. I went back to my routine of riding the bike to and from work, and I haven't been bothered about it anymore by any of my cousin's jerk friends. In fact, they seem to have completely distanced themselves from me and anyone else I know, so none of them made any attempt to apologize, but I don't care since I don't really know them. It's just insane that all this was over a used beach cruiser. It's not even an expensive one. I'd like to ask my cousin one day if it was worth it. But I don't want to see his face again anytime soon. The next one is an entitled parents story. Years ago, my cousin Lucy and I had a strained relationship because she let her son Damien do anything he wanted, never punished him, and brushed away anything he ever did as boys will be boys, or he's just a kid, etc. It came to a breaking point between us when Lucy and Damien were visiting years ago. Damien was 12 at the time, and my daughter Maggie was 9. Maggie was happily sitting and playing her Xbox in her bedroom upstairs. While Lucy and I were talking, Damien got bored and wandered off. A few minutes later, I heard screaming and crying. I rushed up to Maggie's room to find her on the floor, blood all over her face, while Damien was casually playing the Xbox. It turned out he came up and demanded a turn on the Xbox. Maggie said, "Sure, just let me finish the level." So he snatched the controller from her hand, smashed her around the face with it, and then shoved her out of the way. I rushed her to the hospital. Luckily, it looked worse than it was, and there was no lasting damage, and I live in the UK, so no medical bills. But I was furious. I told Lucy what Damien did, and she shrugged and said, "You know how boys are with their video games? She should have just let him play." I told her in no uncertain terms that she and her son were not allowed anywhere near me or my family. We got into a huge fight over this, where she, of course, tried to absolve her little angel of anything. So I lost it and told her if she didn't discipline him and teach him boundaries, she would end up raising a monster who would grow up to be a thug or worse, which infuriated her. This caused fallout with the family for years, largely because Lucy lied and told everyone her son and Maggie had just been play fighting, and that's how she got hurt. It was just an accident, and I was overreacting. After a few years, everyone forgot. I still forbade Lucy or her hellspawn from coming anywhere near me. Several other family members did the same. I can't imagine why. Fast forward to a little before the pandemic. Damien was 19. Just like I predicted, he soon learned that thanks to his mother, he was bulletproof, as she would never believe he did anything wrong. So his behavior got worse and worse, to the point where he was kicked out of every school in the area and had to go to a special school. I got a call from Frank, Lucy's brother, telling me Lucy had been rushed to the hospital, that he knows we don't talk, but Lucy was seriously hurt and he wanted to let me know. Despite our history, I went to visit Lucy, accompanied by Frank and his wife. Before this, we had been really close, and I was upset to hear she was hurt. When I got there, I was shocked by what I saw. She was really banged up, her face swollen, bruises all over her arms. It turned out Damien had done this. She was really struggling for money and he refused to get a job, so she finally tried to lay down the law and tell him to get a job or she was throwing him out, so he attacked her. He almost dislocated her jaw. It was horrific. Now we had a history, but at this point none of that mattered. I was worried and sad for her. I immediately asked her if she needed help with anything. She seemed surprised, but we ended up all having a really heartwarming chat, with her saying how much it meant to her that I came to see her. I thought maybe we were turning a corner and could repair our relationship. We had been really close as kids. Oh, how wrong I was. A few weeks later, I started getting blasted on social media and receiving nasty messages and texts telling me what an awful person I was, and how could I do what I did to Lucy. I was confused. I hadn't done anything. I called Frank. He had no idea either, but said he would look into it. Turns out Lucy had told everyone I had come to the hospital and mocked her, gloating, "I told you so," while she bawled her eyes out. I confronted Lucy about it, asking her how she could lie like that. She hit back that this was all my fault. It's what I deserved. If I knew this was going to happen, why didn't I do more to help her? She then demanded I pay her at least £10K for damages I caused, like WTF. She lied to everyone because she couldn't stand that I had been right and decided to punish me for it. For months I endured hateful messages from family members who believed her lies. Not all my family believed her, of course, and Frank and his wife cleared things up about what really happened. He managed to record Lucy admitting that she lied, which got most off my back, but there were still a few relatives who had it in their heads that there's no smoke without fire, and I must have done something to make her say what she did. But they're all distant relatives on her side, so who cares? Then the pandemic rolled around. Everyone forgot the petty squabbles Lucy and her lies caused. But last month we held a family gathering at my parents', the first in years due to the pandemic. Lucy showed up. Thankfully, Damien was absent on account of serving a prison sentence for aggravated assault and battery, unrelated to what he did to his mother. I went to ask Lucy how she was doing. The first words out of her mouth were, "You need to pay me what you owe me. If you don't, I'm taking you to court. I need that money. It's the least you can do for ruining my life." She followed me around the party, demanding I pay her, telling everyone who would listen that I had ruined her life. My, what a happy family reunion. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.